Hey, this is Anthony Meisner with Land Title. It came to you bringing your big update for the month. Let's look at Boulder County as a whole. I'm going to break everything down into detached and attached because we're seeing some very different things happening. Now, number one, inventory is definitely less than it was a year ago, as you're probably well aware, but we're down about 17.5%. With that, under contracts have stayed fairly stable, which is probably good if you're a seller. Now, the one thing that is really different is we're showing an 18% increase in average sales price. And this is not because homes have risen by 18%, but because we are selling so many more high-end homes than we did this time last year. So we'll dive into that in a little bit. Let's look at the attached for just a second. We're down about 7.5% in inventory. Under contract slipped another 6%. Solds are down. Price is really flat at best. And really, this part of the market could not be more different than what you're experiencing in the detached market. Let's look by submarket at inventory specifically. So the city of Boulder has 360 units on the market. It's about 19% less than this time last year. Longmont, really stable with its 300 units of inventory to where it was a year ago. And then a bunch of the other markets, this is where we really have seen the inventory shortage. Erie, Lafayette, Louisville, Superior, way down in inventory, upwards of 40-50% in some of those markets. But that's really creating that more competitive situation back in those markets. So on the detached side, most of the county looks really great. Now, let's look at the attached side. This is where year over year, we've seen a huge shift in Lafayette's inventory, down 36%. Erie has had a huge bump in inventory, only 33 units, but that is a big 37% rise. Now, Boulder has a little bit less, about 5% less than it did this time last year, and it's just purely frustrated sellers pulling stuff off the market. When you have 280 units just in Boulder in the attached market, it's just too saturated, right? And so with that happening, all these other markets are really mild in comparison, and Longmont's down about 8%, but it only has 100 units. So for market size, right? Remember, Boulder and Longmont are very similar in size. It's a ridiculous amount of inventory in Boulder, and that's really leading the charge in the attached market, causing some of the issues you're seeing. Now, when we look at month supply of inventory, remember that around 3 seems to be fairly balanced. Yes, in detached, we're talking 3.5, but where's it really at, right? The luxury end of the market has a lot more inventory than everywhere else. So Niwot at 6.5 months of inventory shouldn't surprise anyone. The city of Boulder at almost 5 does lead you to think that, we have this excess of inventory in Boulder, but it really is only at the higher end of the market. And then you look at everywhere else. Longmont has the most inventory, but it's fairly well in balance. And then Erie, Lafayette, Louisville, Superior, closer to that 2 months range. It really has been a good year if you're a seller. Yes, prices may not be exactly what they were before in 22, but they're staying fairly stable. And that's actually keeping some of that price integrity because we have so much less inventory to look at than we have in the last couple of years. The attached market, though, is where it gets kind of ugly. We basically start at 5 months of inventory. Lafayette's the only place with less inventory. It's down almost 50% from this time last year, where it's still at 3 months, though. So the attached market has really been sort of the point of all the pain and contention in the real estate market. And this really tells you why, right? Because at 6 months of inventory, buyers basically just get to pick and choose what they want. And you get into a market like Superior with 10 months of inventory, and it's just difficult as a seller. But good news, as a buyer, there's probably a lot of room to negotiate there. Days in MLS, this is detached specifically. We're really running around 35. It's very similar to this time last year. There's a lot of markets that are a little bit faster, Longmont, Niwot, Lafayette. And then, of course, Boulder with more inventory or Superior with more inventory, they have longer days in MLS. So 57 in Superior, lots to choose from. If you look at the attached market, it does show you some interesting things. So we're at 61, right? It's longer to go under contract because you have so much to choose from. But certain markets like Lafayette or even into Superior and Niwot, there are markets here where you see attached inventory selling quicker. Now, it's, more mild conditions in those markets, but also if it's priced right and it really looks good and it's move-in ready, people do tend to buy that product, right? That's what's really selling. A lot of this is not having a great success rate of going under contract. Okay, so let's talk about why the attached sales price or detached sales price rose so much in the last month, or what we're showing year over year. And it's largely due to this. From 1.5 to 2.5 million, we had a huge amount of sales take place. 21 units from 2 to 2.5 million, 43 units from 1.5 to 2 million. those numbers are exponentially larger than what we normally see. And it really did weight the average way more into the higher end of the market. So great news. Also, we sold 12 homes over 3 million. So our average of what's happening, it's heavily weighted right now towards the luxury part of the market, which is a great sign. I think that's wonderful to see some of that moving, and we needed it so desperately. So happy to see that take place. The attached market, you're seeing a little bit of the same thing where you're seeing 6 homes go under contract from 1 to 1.5 million, 1.5 to 2 million, had three sales last month. Those are all good numbers, right? Our year-to-date numbers are kind of back to where they would normally look for the luxury market, but we really are seeing constriction in that 800 to a million. 55% less homes have sold in that market than the rest than last year. And then if you get into some of the lower price ranges, also difficult as well. Now, if we look at month supply of inventory and days on market by price range, this is what I was trying to explain to you. If we're under about 1.5 million, it's still a pretty balanced market, even maybe seller favored in some of these areas. You're really seeing that 2 months of inventory range get up to 1.5 to 2.5 million, 5 months of inventory, way more buyer favored. And then really over 2.5 million, you get that what you expect in luxury, where there's lots to choose from and the best product is definitely selling, but it takes a while. If you get into the attached market, like I said, 5 months across the board, almost on everything. And once it gets into the luxury range, it's going to feel a lot more like detached luxury real estate, right? Just takes longer to sell. Interestingly enough, the really cool stuff coming to market is selling exponentially faster. 1 to 1.5 million sold in 25 days last month, where under 300,000 took 104 days in MLS. So there's some hugely contentious parts in this market where there's a lot of inventory and it's just taking a while to find buyers. Okay, let's talk about that average sales price. Year over year, I did show you that 18% number. It seems so extreme, right? You're seeing most of that take place because the city of Boulder's average was up to 1.7 million. Lots of luxury sold, right? But over the last 12 months, you can really see a little bit more of a reality check of what's actually happening. City of Boulder down 6% in the last 12 months. Louisville is up only 5%. Lafayette down 2%. Longmont down 2%. Interestingly enough, Erie is up 4% and Superior is up 5%. But those are just generalized trends, right? This is an average of averages that gives you a little bit better of a feel on the market. For the county, we're down 1.5% trailing 12 month when we look at it over the last 12, right? And that seems a lot more realistic than up 18%. But I did want to at least give you some ammunition to have that conversation. The attached market is showing across the last 12 months that we're down 5%. That feels a lot more likely. City of Boulder doesn't surprise me. It's showing almost 8% drop, and Louisville is minus 10%. There is some decent parts here, though. Erie is up 1.4%, and Longmont is only down about 2%. So as this part of the market easily feels the pain the fastest and the worst, it really has been certain parts of the market are really struggling, where some of that, like Longmont, where it has a lot less inventory, is clearly retaining a lot more of its value. Now, if we look at the sold units, this is just a good one, kind of an overview if you need to send to somebody. You can see Boulder has sold 3% more homes this year. Longmont has sold 2.5% more homes this year. That's a great sign, right? Lafayette actually is up 10% in sales. So good news there. Some of the submarkets are suffering a little bit. Erie and Superior down about 10%, but you can really see we're right in line with where we were a year ago, only up 1.4% year to date in sales. So that is what it is. You look at the attached market, though, we're down 6.5% year to date. You can see we really struggled in May. That was a month where we just didn't get a bunch sold. Clearly, June caught up quite a bit there, though, so that was a good sign to see. But places like Boulder, 10% drop in attached unit sales year over year it's problematic, right? And it's causing a lot of what we're dealing with. Percentage listed sale price, this slide doesn't include concessions or price drops, but it does tell you a little bit about where we are right now. A little bit more seasonality this year, which has been great to see. That means that, sellers are a little more favored in these negotiations than they had been, because it was a basic flat line for a couple of years where it was really whatever the buyers are willing to work with, and sellers were negotiating hard and not getting very ready places. But we do still see a lot of concessions. Half of a lot of deals in Boulder County still see those. But 98% is 98%, right? Buyers are paying a little bit more than they were last year. So good to see that. If you have any other questions, concerns, look at other data.